Hello, Babs. We're back with more Robinson Jeffers. This time it's a look at George Sterling's book, Robinson Jeffers, The Man and the Artist. Sterling was a friend of Jeffers, and he was also part of the Bohemian Grove, so perhaps he was Illuminati, but we don't know this. Sterling suicided himself, and I can't remember which year, but I believe who was he supposed to meet at Bohemian Grove? Was it H.L. Mencken or Ambrose Bierce? Regardless, bruv, he killed himself. Where is this, from France? The American Library in Paris. So yeah, Sterling was his bro. Boney and Live, right? American Paris Library. Let's look at the other copy. The nicer copy, which I should not be reading. 1926, Boney and Live, right? I always thought it was Bonnie and Live, right? But maybe it's Bone Eye. I think it is Bone Eye. Bone Eye. I've got a bone eye, bruv. Alright. Let's take a look at Robinson Jeffers, The Man and the Artist by George Sterling. Robinson Jeffers, The Man and the Artist. Imagine picking up a small-town weekly and coming on such a sonnet as this. Compensation. Solitude that unmakes me one of men, in snow-white hands brings singular recompense, evening me with kindlier natures when on the needled pine wood the cold dews condense about the hour of regal, fallen from heaven in winter time, or when the long night tides sigh blindly from the sand dune backward driven, or when on storm wings of the north wind rides the foam scud with the cormorants, or when passes a horse or dog with brown affectionate eyes, or autumn frosts are pricked by earliest grasses, or whirring from her covert a quail flies. Why, even in humanity, beauty and good show from the mountainside of solitude. About the hour of regal, fallen from heaven, who among the many score of California's lesser singers could pen a line of such austere magic? And even Bierce himself has concluded none of his satiric verse was so quietly terrible a thrust at the race of mortals. It is a sonnet at once modern in manner and highly individual in character. Obviously the work of a stern and dissective soul, burdened with few illusions or none. It is by our Western genius, Robinson Jeffers. It is a perilous business, the attempt to appraise genius. Genius, wrote Whistler, happens. No prince can command it. No hovel is safe from it. The term chew is grossly misused, and we have come to the practice of calling any person of uncommon talent a genius. But the gift, fortunate or not, is more than that. Implicit in its sense is the element of originality. The style of the artist, handle he clay, paint, or words, being so strikingly his own that it cannot be mistaken for that of another. In the case of the poet, he may express himself in traditional forms, or in those we call modern. But in either event, his work, if he is indeed a genius, will have that highly individual quality that cannot be found elsewhere. It is his own portion of the woof. The woof. That's a peculiar way to describe it. The woof of his inmost being. It may be imitated, but until he wrote, that a special pattern was not on the looms of art. I think that the poetry of Robinson Jeffers amply complies with the law I have indicated. One could pick unerringly a poem by him from a stack of thousands of others. In all that collection there would be no other that could be mistaken by a discerning eye for one of his. And while it is true that there is no poetry that does not, however tenuously, stem from that of former poets and betray, however faintly, their influence, nevertheless the work of genius will be more decisively its own than that of the prior masters, and this to such a degree that such influence is often a thing to be patiently or shrewdly verified. Such derivative touches as may appear in the work of Robinson Jeffers are from the phantom styluses of the great Greek tragedian. Tragedian. I can't say it. I can't frickin' say it. Tragedians. Aeschylus and Sophocles. No other influences greatly intervene, unless they be a breath from the winter woods of Emerson, and occasional gleams from the iris ink of Keats. It will perhaps become the fashion, what of the long sweep and surge of his lines, the reach of his imagination to claim that he stems from wit, and such would be the most obvious criterion, but the similarities are too great to imply any close relationship. Jeffers is incredibly more lithe and rhythmic in his lines than the elder poet, and in other details the difference is even more marked. Or is it marked? Whitman slips but infrequently into beauty. Jeffers' lines grow or blaze with 1,000 manifestations of it. No facile, no superficial beauty, but one soaring far and high in imagination. Whitman seems to have taken, all too often, an almost perverse pleasure in presenting his ideas as shabbily and awkwardly as possible. Jeffers falls into no such penurious egotism. His pace is the pace of a Titan, and not a hobbled, stumbling one. And when we come to deeper, if no more important matters, he immensely exceeds the Gray Singer in scope and significance of vision. He deals with the cosmos, Whitman with the democracy of termites. That's pretty good. His shadow of a magnitude far laps the penumbra of the elder poet, and he has but scarcely begun to sing. In tracing his poetic blood, one looks, as usual, for the Celtic strain and finds that his paternal grandfather came to America from Ireland. His father, William Hamilton Jeffers, LL.D., was a man of wide scholarship in languages, especially Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic. He traveled much in Syria and other portions of the Near East and was 52 years of age when Robinson Jeffers was born. He had married a girl 23 years his junior, the beautiful and vivacious Annie Robinson Tuttle, who had been left an orphan and was brought up by a wealthy Pittsburgh family. Both parents have but lately died. They had but 2 children, John Robinson Jeffers, our poet, born in Pittsburgh in 1887, and Hamilton Jeffers, born 7 years later. The latter is at present engaged in astronomical work at the Lick Observatory. When Jeffers was 5 years old, he was taken to Europe by his parents, visiting France, Italy, and Switzerland. The trip was repeated the next year, England and Scotland being visited, as well as the continent. For several years after that, he lived at Twin Hollows, his father's country home near Sewickley, not far from Pittsburgh. Here he spent much time under his father's tutorship in the classics. Again abroad from the age of 12 to 15, he attended school at Vevey, Lausanne, Geneva, Zurich, and Leipzig. And during the summers of those years went on walking trips with his father in the Swiss Alps, one jaunt being from Italy up into Switzerland. The family then returned to America, where he entered the University of Western Pennsylvania at the age of 16. But within a year they moved once more, this time to Pasadena, California. The poet then entered Occidental College, from which he was graduated with a bachelor's degree at the age of 18. He then took a postgraduate course in English and languages at the University of Southern California, where he first met Una Custer, later to become his wife. What George doesn't mention here is that Una was married and they carried on an affair. She was married to Teddy Custer, who later became their neighbor and good friend, which is weird enough, but he had sent Una off to Europe for a year and forbade her from talking to Jeffers. But supposedly, as soon as she arrived back in California, Jeffers happened to have crossed paths with her. Obviously, they were communicating in the year that they were apart, and then Custer and her got divorced, and then Jeffers, in widely publicized scandal on front page newspapers, married Una. His parents again left America for Europe, he accompanying them, and in 1907 he entered the University of Zurich, but dissatisfied with its curriculum and chafing under parental supervision, returned again via Holland to the Pasadena home. He became a student in the medical department of the University of Southern California. He had I believe it was at UCLA, wasn't it? He had no intention of becoming a practicing physician, but desired the general information and gave his time mostly to bacteriological work. After 2 years, his parents returned, and he went with them to Seattle, where, wishing out-of-door occupation for a change, he entered the forestry department at the University of Washington. He remained there but a year, then went back to Southern California, where, in another year, he being then at the age of 25, he came into a legacy from an uncle, being thus left independent. He then took up his residence at Hermosa Beach, passing the days in verse writing and swimming, till in 1913 he married the gifted and beautiful Una Custer, with whom he moved in August 1914 to their present home in Carmel. It had been their intention to live in Europe, but the World War prevented. Their twin boys were born in 1916. Jeffers endeavored at the United States entry into the war to join the Aviation Corps, but before a necessary nasal operation could be performed, the conflict came to an end. Since that time, he has never been farther afield than the Lick Observatory. Jeffers began to lisp in numbers at the early age of 10, and when 14 years old, won a prize in a competition held by the Youth's Companion. What the hell is lisp in numbers? It would be interesting to see the original draft of that poem, which may still be among the archives of the magazine. Later, when his powers were near maturity, he submitted poems for a year to sundry magazines, and these proving inappreciative, quit in permanent disgust. Editors now desiring work from his hand will have to request it. The Jefferses bought several acres of land at Carmel and built their house on a low bluff, hardly 100 feet from the foam line of the Pacific, where it breaks on the granite walls of Mission Point. It faces directly on the sea. Southward, the beautiful Carmel River enters the ocean at a yellow beach, and beyond the great hills of the Santa Lucia Range go down abruptly to the Pacific. Eastward, the valley of the Carmel reaches in changing colors with the old mission of San Carlos a half-mile distant, while northward, curved like an elephant's tusk, reached the mile-long ivory-colored sands of the main Carmel beach, loveliest of American shorelines. It may be said that no home could lie in a more magical and inspiring location, for the beauty of the spot should make poets expressive or inarticulate of all beholders. The Jeffers' home, garage and all, is built of ocean-worn boulders of the gray Santa Lucia granite, all brought from the shore below, and soon after the completion of the house the poet entered, unaided, on a task that took 5 years for its completion, namely, the erection of a 30-foot tower of the same boulders, all of which, and some were indeed massive, he carried or wheeled from the little inlet whence came those used to make his house. The tower is completed at last and looks fit to endure long after the English speech has become one of the dead languages. Its ground floor of 2 rooms is used as the rainy weather resort of the glorious twins Garth and Donnan, he who impregnated Mario Rukeyser, and then she disowned him for whatever reason. Now aged 10, the next floor is given to Mrs. Jeffers, who is devoted to Irish folk songs and has instilled there a small organ. I guess it should be noted at this point that the inspiration for that was her love of Yeats, William Butler. And the 3rd floor, scarcely large enough to hold a hogshead, is often used by the poet himself as a workroom. Above this, granite steps lead to a turreted platform for which a magnificent view is afforded of valley, forest, mountains, and ocean. There's also a socket to hold a flagpole, though Jeffers is, lost the view for a second. Though Jeffers is hardly to be appraised as 100% American. Wait, why is there a period? 100% American. What's that mean? It's hardly to be appraised as 100% American. It's obviously supposed to be a comma, but what's that mean? He's not American? He was obliged to seek some small technical help in finishing the tower, at which time he wrote significantly those powerful lines to the stonecutters. "Stonecutters, fighting time with marble, you 4 defeated challengers of oblivion." That's how he read, but he had an even more Ernie and Bert voice. "Eat cynical earnings, knowing rock splits, records fall down. The square-limbed Roman letters scale in the thaws, wear in the rain. The poet as well builds his monument mockingly, for man will be blotted out, the blithe earth die, the brave sun die blind, his heart blackening. Yet stones have stood for 1,000 years, and pain thoughts found the honey peace of old poems. True, the race shall die, but ages before then our English tongue will have been absorbed into the universal language, translatable into and preservable by which only poems that depend on their weight of thought, rather than on the verbal magic and music." This guy's absolutely insane. How long is this first chapter? Is this one chapter? "Stand any chance for what we are pleased to term immortality. Jeffers' poems rank with such creations." It also should be noted that Una suffered a miscarriage before the birth of the twins, and I believe Jeffers engaged in a tryst with some unnamed woman on a beach at some point. I believe he cheated on Una a couple times, which led to her going shooting herself in the chest while they were in Taos, but a rib cage deflected the bullet and she lived. But she died of cancer in 1950-ish, and he had to live his last 12 years without his falcon. And he drank and drank. Anyway, what fucking time it is. I have to go to work. I have sketched briefly his ancestry, youth, and environment. A personal description would have to note that he is built on heroic lines physically and mentally, a good 6 feet in height. Shoes lacking, slender but powerfully limbed, and perhaps 170 pounds in weight. In color, he is between the brunette and the blonde, bronzed by the sun since he seldom wears a hat, and with the sternest, most searching blue-gray eyes that I've ever seen in a human face. A graze more piercing than even that of Bierce's. In short, a more austere version of the Greek, and he always wears puttees and a soft shirt. I believe puttees are chinos, and a soft shirt, invariably open at the throat. The whole impression is that of a panther-like litheness and strength. Indeed, as his lines would indicate, he was a mile runner at college and was afterwards accustomed to swim miles to sea. He was basically a fucking merman. Nor is he ever physically indisposed, except from rare headaches, arising probably from eye strain. He only had one eye. The right eye was injured by forceps when he refused to come out of the birth canal, and it remained invalid, and he speaks of it as having ghost and weird. He can see the weird side of the world, but you already know that if you're here, bruv. Jeffers is not shy, though he gives that impression, and for that matter is by no means inclined to sociability. He has a limited number of friends for whom he is capable of disinterested affection. What the fuck does that mean? He is capable of disinterested affection. Hey, bro. But he does not seek their companionship, nor does he care to make new acquaintances. This faculty of reserve and self-sufficiency is, I think, a most valuable asset to him in a literary way, ensuring him the leisure and privacy so essential to his deeply brooding mind. He now seems to have no further desire for travel, hating as he does the physical contact with strangers. The trains and steamers necessitate, but he is a most patient man, and never, I believe, becomes angry at anyone, even the interviewers being, for that matter, quite heedless of public opinion of his poems. He greatly dislikes, however, to talk about his own work, finding such conversation a difficult matter. Indeed, he seems much prouder of his Falcon Tower. It became Hawk Tower. I don't know if it was originally Falcon Tower, since he called Una his falcon, as he has named it, from the fact that such a bird used to haunt its top at the labor. As the labor grew to an end, his output is mainly from the subconscious. As the sheerest poetry usually is, he is a slow worker and he rewrites but little, busying himself only in the morning. I need to busy myself with finding out what time it is. It is notable in this connection that he has an abnormally low pulse, 60 in the afternoon and but 40 in the morning. As to his philosophy of life, it seems to me that he may be classified with the pantheists, for he identifies himself with all nature as an atom in the infinite ferment of space. He believes naturally in the continued renewal of suns and their attendant planets, but not in individual immortality, though he has thoroughly investigated spiritualism. I did not know that, bro. I will recall that someday. He is, in a sense, utterly irreligious as far as the dogmas of superstition are concerned. I thought he was going to say dogmas. I was going to say, what is this? He accepts the fact of the tragedy of life, but thinks existence worth the while. He does not believe in punishment, nor in the taking of life, human or animal. Indeed, he has never killed an animal. That's not true. Well, maybe it wasn't true at this point. He did kill a hawk later on. He wrote a poem about it called Hurt Hawks, and is tender towards such creatures. As to his politics, he is a radical, if anything, but he believes in permitting all lives to take their natural course. Nor would he care to attempt to influence materially either the individual or society. It is significant that he thinks woman a drag and a drain on the creative artist. What is this? I read this before, but this is something else, bruv. Regarding his pleasures, it may be said that he is fond of motoring on the incomparable coastline of Monterey County, as well as up the charming valley of the Carmel. Thither, too, he likes to take long walks with his family. He knows his French, German, Latin, and Greek thoroughly, and reads the classics of those tongues no less than the prose and poetry of the moderns. Indeed, he is an up-to-date library. He is an up-to-date library. It is a strange thing to learn that he does not like music. Hey! I mean, yeah, pretty much I don't really like it either, to be honest. To which, for all his sensitivity, he is an anesthetic as to its values, though it rasps him almost beyond endurance. Just noise, he terms it. It is mostly noise. It's noise meant as a comforting, what's that called, bravo? What's that? I don't want to say security blanket, but it is a coping mechanism, music for the most part. So much in brief for the man. To turn from personality is probably distasteful to him. Maybe I'll just read until I run out of... I think this chapter never ends. I'm going to stop soon, though. We're at this poem, Invocation. From personality is probably distasteful to him. Let me speak of that which truly matters. The beacon light of his poetry on our western horizon, as sudden and startling as the flare of a nova on the heavens of time. His first book was one now rare called Flagons and Apples, consisting mostly of love poems. Though he would deny and disclaim it, the verses are entirely credible to one of his years and are full of beauty and sincerity. That was in 1912. But though he followed the book 4 years later with the far more significant Californians, poems dealing for the most part with the drama of existence. As it unrolled itself before his eyes and with the matchless scenery of the California coast, it was not until the publication of his terrific Tamar that he began to enter into the fame so justly and inevitably his. Californians contains two very excellent sonnets, Wonder and Joy and When I Behold the Greatest. Its high watermark is, however, its splendid opening poem, Invocation. We will get to that later, and I will also pull out Californians, bruv, and read Wonder and Joy and When I Behold the Greatest, but that's at another time. Let's put this in here and close this out, bruvs. If you would like to donate $2 million so I can read books forever until I become a skeleton, that'd be great, bruv. But I gotta get ready for work soon, bruv. Hello, bruv, and goodbye, bruv.